Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and what do you get when you have pretty fabric? A quilt block that looks complicated but is big and simple to put together. It is a quick quilt that has some impact, and that's what we're going to do today. So let's talk fabric. This fabric is called Cozy House, and it is from Andover Fabrics. We have some beautiful blues with some checks and some fun neutral colors in there, and some fun prints. We have the match in the red, the check, the neutrals, and those fun prints. And of course, our neutrals to pull this all together. The pattern that I'm going to do is called Cozy House. Now, it's a beautiful pattern on its own with those 4 big blue blocks and the 5 red in between. But I'm going to cut it down so it's going to be a little bit smaller. And when I do that, I first of all see it in my paper. So I photocopy that page and then I fold it to the size that I want. And that will give me a good idea if I like the way that layout is going to be. Of course, I can change that until I find a layout that I like. And I do like to print it out without color. And that way it can show me the lights and the darks. So I am going to make 4 of these blocks, 2 blue and 2 red. And then I'm going to do those heart blocks and the sashing blocks. And these are nice big blocks. They're just squares that are sewn together that we are going to be able to trim down. But when you twist them, they do have a whole totally different look. So I am going to need 2 blue and 2 red. I'm also going to need some hearts. The hearts are nice and big. They also have a simple construction, but when you use them as cornerstones with big sashing blocks, this whole thing is going to be easy to do with that fun impact. So for the granny squares, we are going to need some color options. We have the background fabric, we have a dark, a medium, and a light. Now we are going to be able to put these blocks together. There is a simple way of doing this. We have these 3 corners. Those corners we're going to do on their own. So let's take those away. Now we have a simple 9 patch. So it's easier if we make this 9 patch and then add on those corners. So that is going to make that 9 patch. So I could just sew those seams and then put those rows together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to make these corners. Now let's do the 4 arms. And this is how they're going to get sewn together. But I would recommend sewing these 2 together first. Once these are sewn together, pressing that seam so it's going up to the background fabric. And by having that seam pressed up to the top, we're going to be able to match both corners. So this seam right there on that edge and this edge are going to match up. And this makes sure that we keep that 1/4 inch right there in the corner and press the seams going towards the background fabric. These 4 ends are now just going to go on the ends. So we're going to start and sew these 2 ends on first. We're going to take these pieces and we're going to press them towards this small point. And when we do that, we're going to be able to match these corners. So when we match these corners together, this little point is coming out a 1/4 inch, and this little point is coming out a 1/4 inch. But it's going to match that back seam, just like it did when we did this top piece. Now when we press those arms out, we're maintaining the 1/4 inch. So when we do trim the block down, we will have that 1/4 inch and all of the seam allowances are out. And we're going to be able to trim those little points off and make this into a square. And we're going to trim it down to 13 1/4 of an inch. And it definitely looks a lot more complicated. The next block we're going to make are these heart blocks. They're 6.5-inch squares, and they're cornerstones to the sashing. So the first thing we're going to do is sew those 2 squares together. Now we're going to do a stitch and flip method for the 2 corners. So we're going to place a square on each corner and draw a line from the corner to the tip. Now these are stitching lines, so we can stitch right on them, and when we fold them back, it didn't change the size, it just gave us another point. So we can trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to press in opposite directions. I like to take the one that's a double piece and press the seams going to that point. For the one that has that solid piece, I am going to press it coming up. And that means these are opposite, and they're going to sew together really easily when we get to that point. For the tops, we need to sew on each of the corners, match those right sides together, draw a line from corner to corner so that we're coming up to the center. And we're going to stitch on those lines and press in the same direction as we did the bottoms. This one, the seams are going to come up. This one, the seams are going to go down. Having those seams pressed in opposite directions means they are going to nestle together. So nestle those seams and stitch a 1/4 inch. I like to press that seam open, and that way we can really see those points. So we need a combination of 9 of these hearts. And these are big 6.5-inch hearts. Our next block is really not a block, but a sashing row. And you're going to be surprised on how easy this is to make. We need 6-inch blocks. Place right sides together, and we're going to make half square triangles. So we're going to draw a line from point to point and stitch on each side of that line. Cut it in half, following that line, and press both of those to one side, and I like to press to the darker side. Now we're going to take those and put them back together so that the fabrics are opposing. Just nestle that center seam up and draw a line from this point to this point. And repeat by stitching on each side of that line. Cut a part on that line, and when we open it up, we have that great little hourglass shape. And we're going to get 2 from the 2 squares. Once those are pressed, we're going to square them up to 5 inches. There's not much that comes off, but I would recommend when we do stitch these lines, instead of doing a 1/4 inch, do a scant 1/4 inch. And that way we have a little extra to trim off. We have a 5-inch hourglass, some background fabric, which is 1 1/4 by 5 inch. It's going to go on either side. And then when those are stitched together, these pieces will fit. They're 4 5/8 by that 6.5. And when it's all sewn together, that's what we have. This is all I'm going to need for that quilt, other than maybe a border. So we need to put it together. And for that, I can check my layout. And when we look at the quilt, we will notice that the hearts are all facing in the same direction. Because of that, I would recommend putting this together in rows. With those 4 big blocks done and that sashing, we are now done the body of the quilt. Now the quilt does have a small white border around it, and it is cut at 2.5 inches. But of course, you could choose any color to do that next border. So the choice is really going to be up to you. If you are going to continue that border at 2.5 inches, we do have a 44-inch square. So we're going to need 2 sides cut at 2.5 inches by 44 inches. And for the other sides, we're going to need that 2.5 inches by 48 inches. So you can choose your favorite color or put the nice beige background border on. The quilt is now a 48-inch square. Now this quilt could be made in many different fabrics, but that Cozy House fabric really did do it well. I do hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will put the link in the description for the free pattern from Andover Fabrics. And as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter. It's all free under Sew Very Easy. And be sure to make every day a Sewtacular day. Bye for now.